I never wanted to be in a situation where all of my money was going to rent and I couldn't enjoy the rest of my life. I'm someone who gets her nails done every 2 weeks like clockwork. I get my hair done once a month. I am a shopaholic. Like, there are other places that my money needs to go that can't just be rent. Hey y'all, it's your girl Key Simone and welcome back to my channel. I cannot believe that the good Lord's year of 2024 is over. I can't believe it's over. And I'm gonna be honest, New Year's 2023, I did not expect for this to be the year that I had, because Q4 of last year almost took me out the game. Everything that could have gone wrong in my life went wrong outside of my career. And I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to get into it here, but just know I was fighting for my life at the end of 2023. So when the new year came, the only thing that I wished for was to make it to January and to find a place to live. That was the only two things I wished for. I didn't even do my 2024 goals until I moved into my apartment, because I couldn't think of anything outside of that. So as I sit here reflecting on the year I had, I'm realizing that it has truly been a very monumental and life-changing year for me. 31 into 32 really readjusted my course in life in the best way. So many aspects of my life have changed for the better. I have truly glowed up this season. And since I started this channel off talking about my struggles from last year and all the changes that I wanted to make in my life going into 2024, I feel like the best way to wrap this year up on this channel is to talk about all the different ways that I have glowed up my life this year. So with that said, I'm launching a new series on my channel just for the month of November called my Baddie Glow Up series, where every single weekend this month I'm posting a new video where I talk about the different ways in which I have glowed up my life this year. And I just want to clarify that this is not my original content idea. I'm actually doing a variation of a series of one of my favorite content creators. Her name is Jazz Turner. She has her Glow Up Diaries, where she talks about all the different ways she glows up her life, everything from mental health, her health and wellness, her fashion, her beauty, her career, all of it. And I love her series. I watch her TikToks all the time. And I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna do something very similar. I'm just gonna be doing mine for the month of November. And like I said earlier, the very first video that I posted on this channel was me talking about why I had to move out of my last apartment, moving back home, and then moving into my new apartment. So I felt like it made the most sense to kick off this glow up series on how I manifested my luxury DC apartment for only $2,000 a month. And if you know the DC housing market and apartment market and how expensive it is to live here, getting an apartment with my square footage for $2,000 a month is a steal. So let's get into it. So when I moved into my first DC apartment, I really didn't have to do too much work and too much searching and too much kind of like heavy lifting. My best friend had told me about DC's ADU program, which stands for Affordable Dwelling Unit. And that just means that your rent is based off of your income and not market price. So depending on what cap you fell into in terms of your income, you could get a pretty good discount on your rent. So I just went onto the DC's ADU website and I found a list of different apartments that were a part of the program. I chose one that was on the corner of like North Capitol and M Street, and I took my lunch break to go do a tour. I did my tour. I was really impressed with it. At that time, I had only lived in like a student apartment and then another apartment building in Hyattsville that was new and really nice. So I knew I wanted something modern, luxury, whatever. So after the tour, the leasing agent was like, listen, it's you and another girl who's interested in this unit. Whoever applies first gets it. Like, that's how easy it was. So I immediately went back to work, went home and applied. And I got approved in a couple of days and was able to move in quite soon after. And then I stayed there for 7.5 years because because I was a part of that program up until the moment I moved units. It was just very cheap for me to live in a very central location. But obviously I did not leave until I started having pest issues, and it turned into a complete nightmare. I basically was like homeless, not really, but I felt homeless. I had to move all my stuff into a storage unit. I had to move in with my girlfriend for a little bit and then move in with my parents for 2 months before I was able to find a new apartment. And so when I started the apartment search, I knew that I had to approach it much differently than I did when I was like 23 going on 24 when I moved to that apartment. Very much younger. I knew I had to be a lot more organized, a lot more meticulous, and just very like clear on what I wanted and what I was not going to settle for in terms of my living situation. So the first two things I did that was a part of this process was, first I set intentions. So like, what were my intentions in finding an apartment? I knew I wanted to live somewhere where I felt comfortable and safe and in a clean environment, just based off of what I went through in my last apartment. I also knew I wanted something high-end and luxury, but that did not break my pockets. Granted, I make significantly more now than I did when I was 23. I actually make pretty good money for living in the DC area, but just because you make good money doesn't mean you should spend it all in your living situation. I never want to be in a situation where all of my money was going to rent and I couldn't enjoy the rest of my life because all of my money was going to rent. I'm someone who gets her nails done every 2 weeks like clockwork. I get my hair done once a month. I am a shopaholic. Like, there are other places that my money needs to go that can't just be rent. So I knew that I wanted something high-end luxury, but that wouldn't break my pockets, and also that I felt comfortable, clean, and safe with. And I knew that I was going to get the apartment that I wanted no matter what. Those were the intentions I set. So that was me kind of manifesting where I end up for myself, because I'm like, this is what you want. This is what you're going to get. I didn't know where the apartment was. I didn't know what the amenities was. I didn't know any of that stuff. I just knew you wanted a luxury DC apartment that are going to meet your standards and that you're going to love and that makes sense for your life today. So those were the intentions I set. I also set a deadline for myself. So I had told my parents before I moved back in, I'm like, hey, I need 3 months. I need 3 months because really I need to financially recuperate from moving twice within a span of 2 months. I had moved from unit to unit, which cost me $3,000, which is insane. And then I had to move back out and I hired movers to pack all my stuff in the storage. I still had to pay rent, a prorated rent until the middle of January. So like, it cost me money. So I was like, hey, I need 3 months where I can just save my money with no additional bill. So my parents agreed to basically let me live there for free. The only bills I had was saving that money because I had obviously canceled all of my utilities and my cable and things like that. My girlfriend paid for my movers and for my storage. She also put gas in my car every week. Because I had just done a project for my grad school class about DC's apartment market and how much you need to live in DC, I kind of had a ballpark idea of what a budget could be for me. So my goal for saving was first month's rent based off of that ballpark budget, deposit, application fee, and then moving fees because I would have to move all my stuff out of storage, and then like any additional stuff I might have to grab. So I was actually able, because I didn't have any additional bills, to save that money within like a month and a half, I'm not gonna lie. But I will acknowledge that that is a lot of privilege for me. I had the privilege of being able to move in with my parents rent free. I had the privilege of having a girlfriend who could help me financially with moving and then provide me transportation and then also pay to keep that transportation up in terms of gas and maintenance and anything like that. So not everyone has that, and I can acknowledge that, but it does make moving so much easier when you can properly save for it. So once I kind of had my intention set and I had my goals in terms of timeline and budget, then I had to kind of figure out where I would want to move and figure out what my options were. And that's where the process that I'm sharing with you guys today comes in, because I feel like the system that I created could be so beneficial to anyone who lives in a big city and is looking for an apartment, especially with the price of rent today, because it really allows you to go through each option with a fine-tooth comb and make the best choice for you. So I created, it's just like an Excel sheet. It's nothing crazy, right? I created an Excel sheet and like a Google sheet that really helped me organize all of the apartments that I was going to consider moving in. Before I did that, I had to create a list of criteria for what I was looking for. So the very first thing on my list of criteria was budget. Obviously, like budget for sure. So for me, my rent had went, and I'm just being very transparent financially here since I'm talking about money. My rent went from being about $1,240, extremely cheap for DC. I literally was in like the best deal of my life until I wasn't. It went from being $1,200 to about $1,800 when I moved units. And I knew from there, based off of just like looking at all the different prices and doing that research project for school, that I would probably pay up to around $2,200 to $2,400 a month in rent. So for me, my soft max budget for an apartment was $2,300. That's where I felt like I could comfortably pay rent and continue to live the life that I was living. I will say I ended up getting a promotion right at the beginning of the year, right before I decided to move. So that little bump increase definitely helped and allowed me to stretch my budget a little bit more. So my soft budget was $2,300, and I say soft because it meant that I was willing to go up some more for the right apartment. And by going up some more, I meant $2,400. $100 more. And it might seem small, but you also have to consider like utilities and additional bills. So at my last apartment, water, sewage, and gas was built into my rent. That is not the case for most apartments now. I had like a grandfather lease, obviously, because I was there for so long. Most apartments now make you pay for those additional utilities. Then you also have electricity. Then you also have cable. So I knew that even though it's only $100 more, that 100 could cover those utilities to a certain point. The second thing on my criteria was location, and that was two-pronged. So one, I preferred to stay in DC. I was willing to move to either Hyattsville or Silver Spring, both in Maryland. And I consider those like the DC side of Maryland because you can get into DC very easily from those locations. I had lived in Hyattsville when I was in college and I really liked it. I liked the area. I still frequent the area quite a bit, going to the PG Mall. I get my nails done out there. I also get my hair done in College Park, so I could see myself living there again. I know the commute going into city, and it is a little further, but again, it's convenient to me if you're living in that area. I've also had friends who lived in Hyattsville, so I also know that area, and it's a very similar experience to me as PG Mall. There's a lot of shopping, there's a lot of food there, tons of apartments, there's a metro, like that's all convenient to me. I considered those parts of Maryland, but I preferred to stay in DC because where I lived before in Noma was so centralized. I could get everywhere in 15 minutes and I did not want to lose that. I also just like love living in DC. I love the big city. I'm just like not ready to be like a outside of Maryland girl just yet for a home. You know what I mean? I've talked about before, buying a home is not one of my life goals. I really could live in an apartment for the rest of my life. The second part of that location was a metro accessibility. So I don't own a car and have never owned a car and do not want to own a car. I do have a license. Nobody thinks I have a license. And it's wild to me because they're like, well, we never see you drive. I'm like, well, you never see me drive because I don't have a car. And I'm only driving if I have to, like if I'm at my mom's house or whatever, and I'm using one of her cars, or obviously like when I have my girlfriend's car. But like, to me, living in DC, you don't need a vehicle when you live in certain parts of DC. So like I've always lived like inside the city of DC because obviously DC's small, but it's big in terms of like different neighborhoods you can live in. I've always lived really central to like U Street, 14th Street, Adams Morgan, DuPont. Like I can get everywhere I need to go in 15 minutes from where I've always lived. So a car doesn't make sense for me because you're going to pay $200 in parking. You have gas, you have maintenance, you have insurance. Like that's hair, that's nails, that's clothes, that's eating out. Like I don't want to spend my money that way. So for me, having a metro was always important. So like even when I lived in Hyattsville, the PG Metro was right there. It was a little bit of a walk, but you could get there. In Noma, the Metro was 2 blocks from me. So I definitely was looking for apartments that had Metro accessibility so that I can be able to get around. And I want to stay on the Red Line because I work on the Red Line. In terms of location, that was obviously like really important to me. The next thing on my criteria list was square footage. So my first apartment was 640 square feet. And when I moved in, it was huge to me. Then when I moved units, I went up to 684 square feet, and that was really nice. My bedroom was still the same size, but my living room was much longer. I was able to get the dining room table for the first time, and I've always wanted one because with a kitchen bar or breakfast bar, you're just constantly sitting on stools. It's not always the most comfortable when you're like working from home and stuff, but it still was on the smaller side. But I was used to like living in that space. And so when I started looking for new apartments, I knew your rent's gonna go up. So you know what also needs to go up? My square footage. I don't care what anybody says. I did not want to move into something smaller for more money. I didn't want to move in something comparable for more money. I wanted to move in something bigger. I want more space for the more rent that I'm paying. And that was just like a non-negotiable for me. I would not have gone less than what I had before because I knew my rent was going up. So I was really looking for something 700 square feet up. Another criteria for me was obviously safety. If you know the Noma area where I lived, I'm gonna just name drop the apartment actually because they try to do me crazy. 2M Apartments is where I used to live. That area is rowdy, okay? It's rowdy. And I won't talk too bad because I feel like the people who lived there, while they were rowdy and there was a lot of crime and there was a lot of just like chaos at all times, they never really bothered me. I had lived there for such a long time and like they knew my face. They kind of knew I lived by myself. So like if anything, they kind of looked out for me. So did the security who worked at my apartment. So did the front desk concierge and stuff like that. However, it still started to get really chaotic, especially after COVID. So a lot of like loitering and a lot of people just around all the time late at night. And like my lifestyle of throwing parties, I'm coming in sometimes 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. It started to become a concern for my safety. And it just was loud. Outside of the loitering, just the amount of sirens you hear. And because the apartment was really close to the 395, 495 highway right there, it was just so much traffic all the time, so much honking and the horns honking. And I didn't even realize how loud it was until I started doing social media, doing TikToks and stuff. And I would have to be aware of my background noise. So with this new apartment, I was really looking for something that was a little bit more chill, a little bit more quiet, a little bit more of my pace as someone who was in their 30s versus like someone who was in their 20s. And then the last, and I think most important criteria, well, I don't know if the most important, but one of the most important criteria were obviously cleanliness of apartment buildings. If an apartment had any reviews about any pest issues, I wouldn't even consider them. Because for me, with my experience, for every person who makes a review about having pest issues, there are 10 people who don't say anything. A lot of people will live with pest issues because it's just too expensive to move. Like if you move into a unit and you find out there's pest issues, even if you have money, it's really expensive to move again. So a lot of people just live and just deal with it. I'm not one of those people. I am not God's strongest soldier when it comes to that. I got the fuck up out of my apartment, but I also had a luxury to do so. So once I had my intentions, I had my timeline and budget and money saved, and I had my criteria, then I was ready to start looking for apartments. And so that's when my system comes into play, and I'm gonna put it up on my screen for you guys. So I just, again, it's just a Google sheet, nothing fancy, but I wanted to organize all of the apartments I was looking for. And so the two things I did use to find apartments was apartments.com and Google search. I think apartments.com is probably one of the best tools for finding apartments because it is just so detailed. You can put in what city or even neighborhood you're looking in. You can put in how many rooms you want, how many bathrooms you want, and what your budget is, and it populates so many options for you. So in my table, I organize it building name so that I can be able to obviously reference back. When you're looking at hundreds of apartments, you get mixed up with names. I don't ever remember anything. And of course, location, neighborhood, because again, it was very important for me to stay in a very centralized neighborhood. I want to be possibly on the red line in the DC city. I had square footage, price point to be in my budget. And you can see really none of the apartments actually hit even my like soft max budget. So that was nice. Floor and apartment, because like the way a lot of these apartment websites are built is it literally shows you the building and you can click on the different floors and then click on the different units. And so to be able to remember like what unit I saw that I liked, I put the floor in the apartment number. Availability, again, I had my timeline, which was 3 months. So really like April was like the latest I would have moved out to my parents. And so I needed to know like when the apartments were available, because not every apartment's available like right when you look at it. Like one apartment I consider was available until March, but that would have been fine because it would have been on within my timeline. Lease length. So one thing I also did that was a part of my criteria was the lease length. I never really understood why my friends were constantly moving all the time, because I had stayed in my apartment for such a long time. I didn't realize, because I was in the program, that like people's rent goes up so much after the first year. Like they use like little discounts and stuff to entice you to move in, and they like increase your rent by like $200, $400, $500. So I was wary of that. And also because I had moved so many times within a span of a few months, I definitely wanted to kind of stay put for this next apartment. I was hoping for apartments that offer longer leases, like 14 months, 15 months, maybe even 2 years, so that I didn't have to move so soon again. And then I also, of course, had metro access. And I actually was very detailed about this. Didn't just put what line it was. I also tried to put the distance between the building I was looking at and the metro line. So for one of them, it was like 2 blocks from Navy Yard, steps away from Rhode Island, 10-minute Uber ride to Brooklyn Red Line, or 20-minute Uber ride to work, things like that. So I tried to like be very clear, because even though I really didn't want to consider any buildings that did not have a metro accessibility, if they did, I wanted to see what the distance was so I could be able to calculate how much it would cost for me to commute to work. The last thing I put was general complaints. So again, if there were any pest issues, that wasn't even a consideration. It didn't even make it into my table. Okay, it wasn't even on my list because I'm not moving in there. I'm not moving in there because one pest issue means the whole building has a problem. I don't care what anybody says. If they made it to my list, that means that their complaints weren't necessarily deal breakers for me, but some were just like yellow flags. So that was kind of my list. And so I organized all of this into my table. And this was done over a course of weeks, right? So I would add stuff, delete stuff, remove stuff. And to really get this information, I had to dig through the website, the Google reviews, apartments.com. Like it took me time to be this detailed. So once I had my list, then I was ready to start considering apartments. And just to be clear, all of these apartments hit what was on my criteria somehow. If it didn't hit all of them, it would hit 4 out of 5. If it was 3 out of 5, it didn't make it. And so once I had finalized my list, then I really need to take the time and sit with the list. I didn't want to make any rash decisions at all. I think I chose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I had 7 apartments on my list. I wasn't going to tour all 7 apartments. I wanted to be, again, very intentional about what buildings I actually toured and making sure they met my standards. And so I printed them out, and then I literally sat there. I made my girlfriend sit there with me, and I went down each column. These are all the general complaints. I also printed out the unit floor plan. Something else that I was really looking for was like a bigger bedroom. A lot of times with apartments, you'll have smaller bedrooms and like bigger living rooms. I was looking for a bigger bedroom because I have so many clothes. Now, it wasn't on my criteria because it wouldn't have been a deal breaker, but it was something that I was looking for. So that's why it was important to print out the floor plans of every unit. It literally will tell you like, this is the side of the bedroom, this is the side of the living room. And then my girlfriend was pulling out her ruler and like showing me in real time what the size was so that I could like envision it. And I'm telling you, it was super helpful. And then I obviously went through all the complaints. Through that process, I was able to eliminate a few apartment buildings that I was considering. When you're first looking through things and you're seeing these kind of like yellow flags, you're like, oh, okay, like whatever, cool, I'm just add it to the list. But then when you go down and you start to compare and contrast to other buildings, you're like, oh, that's actually a big red flag, eliminate that. And from there, I went from 7 buildings to 4 buildings, and then from 4 buildings to 3 buildings, because one of the buildings was right next door to my old apartment. And my girlfriend was just like, if your old apartment has pests and they literally share a wall, don't you think they would also have pests? And they had a restaurant underneath them. So I was like, oh yeah. But then once I had my top 3, I didn't book my tours for each building. And I try to do them within literally the same days. Like I think I did 2 on one day and 1 the next day, because I wanted to be able to take notes of my experiences and be able to compare and contrast while the information was still fresh on me. I also took with me this list with all these details so I could tell them exactly which unit I went to tour. I kind of already knew the price point, so I could double check on the price. I also brought the floor plans so I could compare, because some things could look bigger online or look smaller online than they are in person. And that was super helpful to kind of have that like packet of information with me. From doing those tours, I went from 3 options to 2 options. And then when I had my top 2, I wasn't ready yet to move, right? Because I was still saving for my money and still like getting all my financials taken care of. I had to like fix my credit and all that stuff like that. So I kind of just had those two buildings kind of at top of mind, and every week I would just check to see if my units were still available, making sure the price was still the same, and like adjusting my table if anything had changed. And then when I hit my goal budget and had everything ready to move, I then went and toured again. I definitely advise touring more than one time, because you might go look at a unit again and not like it as much as you did the first time, or they might have another unit available now that wasn't available before that's better. So I went and toured again, and that second tour really allowed me to make my decision. So I reached back out to Lisa, the agent from this building. I was like, hey, I'm so interested in some of your units. Can I come back out and look at them? I walk into the apartment and I'm just like, oh shit. When I toured the first time, which was the beginning of January, I toured like 6 units, because my property management in this area owns 4 buildings that are all really close to each other. And so I was able to tour in 2 of the buildings. And when I toured this particular unit back in January, I was just in awe of the layout. It was like not what I thought I would want, but it just immediately felt like this could be home. Like when I walked in, there was kind of like breakfast nook. It was like this built-in kind of like counter space that you could turn into anything. I'm like, I could do my office area here. And then they had a great coat closet, and then they had a washer and dryer. And then the living room space was huge with these big open windows that kind of look out into the promenade. And I love that. Then there was like a little hallway, which I've never had before. Like my old building, all of my, like my bedroom, my washer and dryer, my bathroom, my coat closet, it was all on one wall, right? And so this kind of was broken up into like, it felt like an apartment almost. An apartment, it wasn't an apartment, but it just felt different. It felt like a home. And so there's like a little hallway, and then you go into your bedroom. The bedroom was massive. Like, I don't know if you guys can see back here, but like there's so much space in between my closet and my bed, because this bedroom is so big. Like I eventually want to put an ottoman there because I have space for it. There's so much space in between where I'm sitting, which is my makeup table. I have IKEA closet system right next to me, in my bed. At my old apartment, my closet system, if I put my foot out from my bed, I could touch my closet system because there just wasn't a lot of space. I have a huge walk-in closet. And then when I went to the bathroom's what sold me, y'all, because I hate small ass bathrooms. I spend a lot of time in my bathroom. And so I like bathrooms that have space to them, so I don't feel like I'm like in a fishbowl the entire time. Bathrooms get so hot for real, like with the heating tools and this and that. So the bathroom was a good size, and it had so much cabinet space. Like the amount of cabinets in this apartment is insane. And why that's important to me, I know that sounds like so lame, but like at my old apartment, there was no storage space at all. No, there was none. Like I did have a decent walk-in closet, but like outside of a very small coat closet and a very small linen closet inside my bathroom, I had no storage. A lot of money in the Container Store in IKEA to organize all the shit I had in my apartment because I had nowhere for it to go. I went on my tour. I was like, I really like this apartment. Like it had a galley kitchen, which I never thought I would want, because I've always had a kitchen that I could walk into with a ton of counter space. But they had an island that came with the apartment that you didn't have to buy. They also had concrete floors. I obviously have always lived with hardwood floors, but the concrete floors, I was like, oh, like this is sexy. It felt very like modern, but industrial, dark, but still like very luxury. And I'm like, oh, this fits my personality so well. So when I came back to tour again, I walked in, I was like, oh wait, this is the exact apartment I toured and I liked the best in January. I didn't even realize I had chosen the same apartment to move into. It was just like a full circle moment. Like the universe was like, this is where you should be living. That's really how it felt. Like even outside, like it was so quiet. I was like breathing the fresh air. The birds were chirping. The squirrels were singing. And so I signed my lease, and I've now been in here for, February was like 2 weeks. So like March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. I've been here for 8 months, and it truly feels like the best decision I could have made for me in terms of my living situation. This is not my dream apartment, because my dream apartment would be like a penthouse apartment that has a staircase and a room for my office, a room for my clothes and makeup, a room for me to sleep in. It'd have a big kitchen, floor to ceiling windows. Like that's my dream apartment. But this is the dream apartment for where I'm at in my life right now, if you understand what I mean. Like, this makes so much sense for who I am today versus where I was living. I definitely think God was trying to tell me with my last apartment, it's time to move on. And this is me moving on. And I love her, okay? I love her. And again, she's affordable for DC. And it's so funny because everybody in my life loved my last apartment, but when they saw my new apartment, they were like, oh, this is it. Like, this is perfect for you. This is so much better than your last apartment. Even the cleaning company that I use, I reached out to him for the first time since moving, was like, hey, like, can you come deep clean my apartment? And the moment she walked in, she was like, oh my God, this is so much nicer and so much better than your last apartment. So it just feels like it was like meant to be. Like, touring so many apartments in January and like liking this one the best and like not remembering until I walked through the door, I was like, oh, like, this was for me. This was like the best decision I could have made. I love my apartment, and I was able to get a 14-month lease. So I feel like very settled here in a way that's really nice. It's just so much quieter and just makes so much more for my sense today. So yeah, that is how I manifested this apartment. I think it's really important that I set intentions for what I was looking for and what I knew I was going to find for myself. Also setting a budget and like having that criteria and doing the proper research really made a difference. So y'all let me know if y'all want me to share my little Google sheet with y'all. I will literally just send the link to your email. I'm not trying to like sell it for money or anything. It literally is like the most basic Google sheet, but it's just so detailed and so organized and so helpful. And I definitely think it made a difference in terms of me finding a place that hit all of my big 5 criteria. And like I said, I will be posting a new video every Sunday of this month as a part of this Baddie Glow Up series. So make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss a video. Like, comment, and share, and I will see y'all next time.